So we're going to invite Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, we'll try it again. Go back to where we were. And sorry about that, but I think we got it going now.
All right. Well, all right. So just to say that the work of citizen advocacy always involves asking a well-connected local citizen to consider and then enter into a personal relationship with an individual person who has a developmental disability, who usually is economically poor, but not always, usually, almost always in a tough situation, and usually does not have active family. And so the role of the advocate is to understand, respond to, and represent the other person's interests as best they can, and to gradually bring other people into the story. In the beginning, we saw the relationships as, quite frankly, sort of one way. You know, that the advocate was the helper and the person with disability needed the help. That's true in one way, but as time went by and we were listening more closely to what people who were advocates were telling us, people talked a lot about what they were gaining, what they were learning, how they were beginning to see the world in a little bit different way, things they'd noticed about their own prejudices and their own fears. And that's when we began to realize that really, in some ways, citizen advocacy was sort of a social learning experiment. And it was, in the broad sense of the word, sort of an open classroom. And that's when it got, quite frankly, that's when it got really interesting. So through the years, about 700 people directly involved with other individual people who have disabilities. Again, some of those matches that lasted 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, decades. Some examples of intergenerational relationship between families where teenage children have grown up and become allies and advocates for their father or mother's person that father or mother knew. And then many examples of where we would describe, we would talk about a match as between advocate and protege between two people. But when you would count up the number of people the advocate had reached out to ask for help or get involved or that kind of thing, there might be 6 other people that were part of the story. Or in one example, over a period of 5 years, over 300 people got involved and built a house for a family so they could bring their uncle out of the nursing home. And that was in the 80s. And that was eye-opening for us because, again, it gave us some sense of the power and possibility when individual people align themselves with people that are socially marginalized and invite other people then onto that journey to make things different, make things better for people.
Thank you. And again, that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people through the years who had these interactions. So it's quite incredible feat. Again, I wasn't alive during that time in Savannah when you're doing all this, but today, what do you see today as some of the things we need to improve?
Oh, gracious. Well, a lot of things in Savannah haven't changed over 40 years, and that's frustrating. I mean, most of the organized human service system here continues to be based on segregating people more than including people. That's been a frustration for 40 years. The state of Georgia is not, quite frankly, a very given place, and scarcity is a huge issue here. I mean, there's just not very much, and people have to fight for it pretty hard. And it's hard to ask for quality if really you scrap your way just to get a scrap. It's hard to raise expectations for good quality services if the battle has been just give me something. And in some ways in the state of Georgia, in most communities, experience that many families who have a son or a daughter or a person who has a developmental disability has is just give me something. So scarcity would be part of it, and this continued the inertia around people being segregated. A friend of mine calls that their kindism, that somehow if you have an identified disability level, you've been most like people that are quote with your own kind, and that's so woven into the structures that people hardly even question it.
And that's one of the issues I think all communities are facing, and certainly it's something we're working on today. Before I go to the next question, does anybody else have a question for Tom? We still got about 15 more minutes. Anybody have a question? Maury.
Yes, I'll quickly introduce myself. Maury Pasternak. I'm as of this past winter, a winter Savannian. So I've only spent 2 months in Savannah. Live in Northwest Wisconsin. Though I am a Southerner. I grew up in Memphis. My question, and the reason for the long-winded introduction, I guess I'm curious in terms of the matches, how much of an issue have there been with financial class differences between the thick ice person, the thin ice, and in particular, racial differences? Has it worked well across races or not?
I have a little bit of problem hearing you because the audio is breaking up. I don't think as I'm coming to you or not, but I think I got your question. I'll give it a try. One of the things that we liked about, or I like about this is it really is an opportunity for people who would not have had a chance to know each other to get to know each other. And that seems like a good thing to me, that we can help people have the experience of getting something they would poorly known. And many times, the most powerful learning moments have happened when people have had most of that you described. That, and I'll give you an example. My friend Bill Daniel tells a story. Said, he said, Kohler, I see how this works. You are somebody generally fairly conservative and who's, got plenty of financial resource to be a representative and help somebody who uses Social Security, SSI income, $20 a month, manage their money. So you ask them to be representative paid, they say yes, and they do. And at first, they talk about how it's just all about budgeting. And 3 months into it, what I begin to hear the conservative person talk about is it doesn't matter how you budget $622 a month. You can't live on this. And so that's that moment where a person who may have thought that, the government's doing enough, the government's doing too much, they realize, well, maybe not. And then when they realize that not only that, but the person that they've gotten to know, if that person works, they threaten to melt them and they're at base income. And so there's a disincentive to get a job. And that's the first time this person has ever thought of that. So people can have kind of direct learning experiences. I mean, that to me is how we radicalize people. To give people a chance to sort of experience what's real and have to confront it at that level, literally face to face. I don't know. I think that if I was able to think that makes sense.
Yeah, and for those of you having trouble, we're having a little trouble still with Tom's video, but we're going to continue going for about 10 more minutes if that's okay. So finish up. But again, I think what he's done here is on a one-to-one basis done everything we would hope could be done, and that is bring people from different places together to work together to help each other. It doesn't matter if it's because of a racial difference or religious difference. In his case, of course, people with these type of difficulties mentally or physically. But the idea is he has been one of the key people in our community that can go to every section and work and say, here, could you help from this area, from this area? In other words, he's getting people to cross the road, which is very difficult in some places. And I think Savannah has been one of them. I certainly believe it's better today than it was from what I hear 30 or 40 years ago, but it still sounds like there's a lot to do. And Tom has been instrumental in, what we say, knocking down the first domino or two to create this kind of belief system that we can work with others. And then also not only that, but look what he's done for these particular individuals. These individuals who probably would have had very little assistance outside of their families, all of a sudden have people who come to him and talk to him, and the people who work with them are learning so much. So it's a catch-22 in a perfect, but in a good way. And do we have any other question? I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, I would say that there's been a little video produced recently called, I think it's called Everyone at the Table. And it's 11-minute video, and it shows the coverages for Rabbi that you've been to before. And it's on YouTube. And I think the video might answer the question that was just asked in a nice concrete way.
All right, so that's called Everyone at the Table?
Yeah, I think if you Google and Everyone at the Table, YouTube, Everyone at the Table, Savannah, or Kohler, it'll pop up.
All right, so that is a wonderful thing to encourage everybody to do, is to look at this video. I'm gonna look at it right after this. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Kohler? For those of you who are new to Savannah, you may not have met him, but only if you've only been in Savannah 3 days, because I think if you've been in Savannah 4 days or more, there is a city law that states you have to get to know Tom Kohler. That's just how it is. And again, which you'll see is if you go to Sentient Being, he basically holds office there every day, or some of the other cool places in town where he is not only known as a legend, but also someone who is mentoring so many other people. So you'll see a lot of people who have questions as to what they can do coming to him. So as we're concluding, Tom, what is your suggestion for people who want to help out in similar ways that you have helped out, both for young people and people who've retired? Because I think we've had plenty of both in our area.
I do think we have plenty of both. And, about 15 years ago, a theme that we developed at Chatham Savannah was build good intergenerational bridges. And I do think it's a huge opportunity and challenge for us now. If there are people on this call that want to get more connected to some of the, quote, young activists in Savannah, I'm a good bridge for that. And some of the, quote, young activists, whatever young means today, because that's actually changed in the past week, meaning that some of the protests that have been organized here have been organized by 15-year-olds. And so my 29-year-old friends that are activists, they are now called the seasoned activists. And it's like, well, wait a minute, who's young? What's that mean anymore? But I think my point here is that are some really wonderful young activists, let's say 30, 15, that are doing really interesting and can use all the support they get. That can be moral, can be personal, can be can be financial. There is a network here under 30, very progressive, doing a lot of different things, many times without any organizational structure, very, very informal, very loose, a lot of opportunity there for sure. And then the other thing I would just say that we can all do, I think, is just sort of when we're out and about these days, just speak personally, just try to move a little bit more slowly and pay a little bit more attention to everything that's in front of us and see if we can ourselves feel like we're learning something new. Because it seems to me right now, certitude is something we need to be very, very cautious of, and curiosity. We need less certitude and more curiosity. And I think that's true for all of us in the entire culture right now. Certitude is killing us.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was on mute now.
Oh, okay, that makes me feel better. It wasn't me.
We're just speaking with Tom Kohler, former executive director of Chatham Savannah Citizen Advocacy, who is one of the mainstays in the social justice movement in our area and has been for years. And again, I think one of the things you said, and again, there was some technological issues, but the idea that we're bridging the gap of age, which is essential because we need young people, but we also need people who are not so young to work together so people learn to work at every generation. As you mentioned, the protests we just had recently, some of them were started by a 15-year-old. And apparently if you're 29-year-old in advocacy, you're considered old. So I guess 29-year-olds retire now, right? You get social justice, social security at 29. But what we're seeing today is that people want to advocate for change and they don't always know how, and they need people like you to help guide and show us the way to do it, whether individually or through organizations. And so what we're seeing today with all of these movements for change is what you've been doing for a very long time. And we want to thank you for all of that. Before we conclude, does anybody have a question? And anybody have another one? I know it's kind of hard because of the technology.
One last question. Your perspectives on the impact of the pandemic in working with people who might be isolated because of a disability.
Mm-hmm. Brutal. In one word, brutal. You know, I don't think when we actually find out what's happened inside the nursing homes across America, it will be a national, should be a national shame and a national tragedy. I don't see any way around that. If I look on the bright side, I can do. I talked to a family recently who have a daughter with Down syndrome, I think 6-year-old now. And they talked about how for the past 2 months, they've spent so much more time at home and they have spent so much more time walking around in their neighborhood and slowing down and staying sort of home. They have realized that there's much more opportunity for this, much more opportunity to like appreciate it literally than the law that they imagine. So that's interesting to think about, that maybe this family will be less affected because the idea the daughter needs somehow always be involved in specialized services of some sort, and they increasingly imagine their daughter can be integral to their neighborhood and well known and well liked among their neighbors and be a bigger part of that world. So, you know, that's a little bit of a glimmer of what's possible maybe in that direction. But I think really congregate care, we're actually going to see the truth about congregate living care after we get past this in some ways. I mean, we're people that are locked inside bedrooms and group homes and personal care homes in the city. The number of people that are in the nursing, I mean, it's not going to be very pleasant.
Thank you, Tom. And I apologize. Thank you. I apologize for the technical issues. We may have Tom come back in a couple of weeks to let him do this again when our computers are working. But again, if you haven't had a chance to meet him in person, he is a mensch. Not only a mensch, but a mensch on a level that few people have ever achieved. And again, as we know, he's still, even though he left and retired from the original organization, he's still doing so much in our community. And so we are so fortunate to have you, Tom. Thank you. I consider it really an honor to be your friend, and we're so thankful that you came on today. Next week, we're going to continue the interviews as we go. We'll be interviewing somebody every Tuesday at 1 o'clock, which will be on YouTube. And it was a privilege to start off with one of the greats in our city, Tom Kohler. And again, thank you, Tom. We appreciate it. Everyone stay safe. And again, we'll see if Tom, if you're up for it.